Bonjour, Vincent Lamijon, Magazine Challenge.
Vincent Lamijon, Magazine Challenge. I have two questions. What would be the pace of production for Rafales? Because you have the Mérignac plant, which will probably ramping up. Will it be 3 or 4 aircraft? And then a question on NGF. It seems that there is some new tensions between the industrial partners. Do you think it is the right time to launch your B plan that you announced a year ago? Production pace. I'd like to set the stage. It's always difficult because you have the deliveries, and that's per the contract. But for Falcons, it's slightly different. We sell per slot available. For the Rafale, it is as per the terms and conditions of the contracts. In 2022, we will be meeting the delivery deadlines. But the pace of production, we have had great difficulties to explain it to the official services. During COVID, we were below 1. And for some plants, we were close to 0, because when you deliver an aircraft at Mérignac, you started to manufacture it 2.5 years before, 3 years before, particularly in our plant in Seclin. So from the industrial standpoint, we need to smooth out the manufacturing pace. It went almost down to 0. We were very concerned in 2021, plus the pressure on orders, which were going down. But the Dassault has been able to recover when it comes to our backlog. So our pace of production is close to 2 now. On average, it's 2. So the orders are such that we will have to ramp up to meet the contract deadlines in the coming years. And we will move up to cadence 3 or pace 3, production pace 3, because of the orders that were put by the Emirates and Indonesia. But for the Emirates, the aircraft won't be delivered from 26 to 2031, while for Egypt and Indonesia, the deliveries will be in a shorter term. So there will be a peak in our production. Now, I anticipate another question, because success calls for success. Should there be more orders, we would be able to take them in the short term. We would rather, of course, have them delivered later, because for the Tranche 5 aircraft, which will start for France as from 2027, at the same time as that of the United Emirates would be at a pace of 2, we will be keeping a pace of 3 if new orders were to be taken in. Now, for the NGF, the new generation fighter, well, that's the very essence of cooperation. We consider that, first and foremost, France has defined it and expressed its intention to take the lead in this area. Now, you may interpret it the way you want. So France could be the prime contractor, for instance. And we've designed a series of pillars in the SCAF program. One of the pillars is aircraft, where Dassault should be a leader and should be the main contractor. This has resulted in difficult negotiations. I thought it was history, and everything was done to start a fresh negotiation from this starting point. But you have Airbus in Spain, Airbus in Germany, Dassault in France. So the 3 countries, also the 3 states behind that, additional requests were introduced to support this program. I said that there was a red line not to be crossed, is that there's a need to have a leader. But if it is only for co-construction, something, I won't go for it, because it would be lying to the armed forces to say that we have a co-development with no leader. Because we also have to meet the deadlines in terms of cost, operation, and cost and operations. I'm not ready to sign yet. France is a leading state for this contract. We're ready to sign, But we've done everything which was possible to sign with Airbus, and I'm waiting for Airbus's signature. Para Patel from Bloomberg on the same topic. It seems to me that a German minister made a statement about it and about the need to promote further this project because of the events in Ukraine. Do you think it would help the situation, the intention of the German government to mobilize its investments in defense is a good thing, but NGF, we said the first aircraft should be ready in 2040, but it will be after 2040 because of the delay, because we need to have a final standard, because we also have the armed forces to have it integrated in 2050. And I think that by that time, Ukraine will have a particular status. No, for the next 30 years, for France and Dassault, the priority is Rafale. But we're ready to work on the new generation. My engineers in my study design offices are eager to work on this. The current situation can make the signing of agreements between governments easier, provided the rules are complied with. An additional question. You've said that you had to freeze contracts with Russia. Well, Russia has generated a certain number of clients for Falcons. We have some Falcons that are being flown in Russia. We will have some difficulties in supporting them because we will be complying by the sanctions decided by the authorities, of course. So we will stop customer prospection in this area, and we had a few aircraft for Russia, and we will see on a case-by-case basis how these contracts will be frozen, because the force majeure terms and conditions are difficult to interpret. So we try to interpret this as an industry. We're not the only one in this situation, as you will easily understand. So we'll check the current status of these contracts. What are the aircraft? All types of aircraft. High-end Falcons, because Russia is a big country and their users were using 8X, for instance, 10X, the whole range.
Same question, if you could give a little bit of forecast of more details on what the conflict will do on business jet deliveries and orders, please.
Yes, would you like me to answer in English or en français? Ah, okay. Bon, donc
forecasts, well, the US were the main focus of recovery. This is from the US that the demand went up. We're not the only ones in the US market, of course. There are some competitors, so there was a kind of market sharing. And at the mid-2021, and now we've also noticed that there was a recovery in Europe. So the two areas of recovery are the US and Europe. We sell also a few aircraft in Asia, but COVID is still very active. I went to sign the contract in Indonesia. We barely had access to the country. You know the situation in China, in the neighboring countries. There is still more or less in the lockdown because of the Omicron wave. And we're hoping that this new COVID wave will be behind us and that we will be resuming with standard business also in Asia. But Asia is not the biggest market, unlike Europe and the United States. I have several questions on SCAF. You say you're waiting for Airbus to sign. And for the FCAS, you said that you have to make a decision on the phase 1A. And if nothing happens by the end of the year, what's going to happen? And I have a question also about the orders from Egypt, 30 or 31? So there's an additional aircraft? Well, for the first question on the FCAS, well, for the phase 1B was signed in September. We've maintained our teams on track up to the end of 2021, saying that everything will be unlocked. But one has had to realize that things are not as smooth as we expected. And I can't have 100 engineers who are very high-level workers and highly skilled on duty, waiting for the green light from XYZ. So I have reorganized or reshuffled the team to other businesses or other sectors because I cannot have my engineers remain idle. Now, I'm not saying that if the signature is not made in the coming weeks, we will not redirect those people to redesign a new aircraft, because I know they are eager to design an NGF demonstrator. And maybe some would say, I've found another job and I don't want to. It depends on engineers also. Now, if the order comes in 6 months or at the end of 2022, there's no problem, but we'll have to take our time before saying yes. So in 2022, we'll have to make a decision. We cannot wait with our pen in our hand over a blank page. So we have to come to solutions, because it's a problem to be settled amongst the industries and the states involved. But in my view, it has taken a bit too much of a time. The order from Egypt, the additional order was 30 aircraft. Then there was some budget remaining from the previous contract of the 24 aircraft, so an additional aircraft was ordered. Good morning. I'm from Les Echos. On FCAS, could you please tell us why this order of flights is so important and causes so many tensions, for the general public to understand? And then my second question is, don't you think that it should be written in black and white in what is called the strategic compass, or boussole stratégique, and when the law will be passed? Because for the time being, it's a bit the strategic compass, or la boussole stratégique, is something that will be driving cooperation throughout the EU member states. But FCAS is only 3 countries. It may change, but then we're not going to have 6 months, but much more time. Now, for the flight controls, well, it's because there are some specialists in developing flight controls. Dassault is the only aircraft manufacturer in the world designing its aircraft by designing the flight controls in the same design office here in Saint-Cloud. And that's the strength of Dassault for generations of aircraft. So we have a long accumulated experience in flight controls, leading us to think that we are amongst the best in class worldwide, if not the best in class. When it comes to the contracting format, since the 3 countries are going to entrust us with this contract, and in order to come up with a demonstrator, and I'm speaking about a demonstrator, the one who designs the aircraft is also the ones who design the flight controls, and that's Dassault. And the expertise is here in Saint-Cloud. Not only here in Saint-Cloud, it's also in Argonay, where we manufacture the flight controls, because we have 100% capacity, the software for the computers, and we test them in our various sites. So that's the software for the computers embedded in the flight controls. So as an aircraft architect, we are also the flight control architect. So to me, there's no problem. If you hear about a problem, I will need to have some explanation. If others think that they're better than we are, or just as good as we are, to manufacture the flight controls, I'm ready to work with them. Airbus is doing pretty well with its flight controls, and their design office is in Toulouse, is not in Germany. But it's part of our architecture. We take responsibility for the leadership of the aircraft design and defining the flight controls. It doesn't mean that we're excluding the others in the work packages that have been defined for the flight controls. There is some work for the others in Germany. It could be Airbus in some instances. It could be also other companies with, like Ainsalt, for instance, with whom we work, because one day or another, they will also be able to design and manufacture flight controls. So as far as I'm concerned, there are no problems with the flight controls. The problem is on the other shore of the Rhine River.
François Dorcival. Mr. Chairman, as for the Rafale, could you today tell us how many Rafales are flying? If you add the ones delivered to the French armed forces and those delivered to the other armed forces. Today, how many Rafales are flying? That's a different calculation to make. I should have the answer somewhere in my papers. We've delivered for France, out of the 192 ordered, we've delivered 100 and a few. So there are at least 100 flying for France. Yeah, here you go. So 152 delivered to France. And for export, we have 24 for Egypt, 30 for Qatar, and 33 for India. So that is 239 aircraft delivered today on the whole. This does not include, we need to add the 6 Greek pre-owned aircraft that we've delivered, but that we have deducted from France. So the 239 is the right figure. But it changes every day because we keep delivering. We're still delivering today. But on the whole, we have 200 aircraft for France before batch 5, before tranche 5, and 300 aircraft for export, including the UAE, Indonesia, and the additional Greek aircraft. This is more or less, okay? It's a little under 300 and 192, and we'll have tranche 5. So how much will it be? 30, 42, or more? If our armed forces need more, considering the context, and because of the high intensity preparation to war. I'd like to go back to your last comment. If the needs increase, if that was expressed, would you be able not to increase the production output, but accelerate production? Because you say you need 3 years to make a Rafale. No, we cannot accelerate production. Well, we do it. We try to do our best. But there is a cycle. And the cycle begins with the supply of material. And it's not that simple, considering the context. The delivery of all kinds of, I'm going to use a word, all kinds of things around each plant, so that all the companies working around the plants, subcontractors, we have 500 companies working for us, and they themselves, they have cycles. So therefore, these cycles, if we increase the production output, of course, we facilitate things. You can correct better if there are problems arising, but it isn't easy to bring down the cycle to less than 3 years. 3 years is a good cycle. We've made efforts on a case-per-case basis so that we can go a little faster. So if France was to order additional aircraft, but we first have to already deliver those that have been ordered a long time ago. Those are the famous 28 that were ordered. I have forgotten the date they were ordered. I wasn't even the chairman. So it's more than 10 years now. So it's not a problem with the cycle. It's a problem of accepting deliveries. So it's a financial issue, you see. The military do not renounce their aircraft. There are some budgetary choices. And you know that very often the Rafale is the adjustment variable of the French budget. Luckily, we had export, otherwise we would have trouble maintaining the manufacturing line. Not only Dassault, but all the other 400 companies that build Rafale in a very random way in one corner of their workshops. So now there was a difficult COVID period, but now the Rafale is bringing work to them. And it is almost exclusively in France that the Rafale is produced. At Dassault, Safran, Thales, and in the entire supply chain on our territory. And so that is very good news, the increase of this production output for our entire aeronautical line. Veronique, I think, first. Thierry Vigoureux, Le Point. So in terms of employment, what are the hiring perspectives for 2022? So in 2022, well, we were a bit moderate in 2020, 2021. There was less work. We didn't increase the number of people. Now we're going to hire more people because the production output is going to increase. But during this difficult years, we reduced our load. Now we're going to give more work to our subcontractors, and that's normal. It's give and take. So we're going to take support on subcontracting to help us in this increase in production. But of course, we're going to hire. There's a cycle of people going to retire. So therefore, we do need to hire to offset that. And we have to hire because we're going to get more work. So we're going to hire. It's not simple at Dassault because there's a lot of tension on employment. There's always this paradox. We have some millions of people who are on the dole and we have trouble hiring. But Dassault is attractive, whatever some people might say, and we hire engineers and we hire manufacturers and technicians. So several hundreds of new hirings that will be carried out in 2022 within Dassault, but some strong hirings among our subcontractors too. And the furlough will go back into full employment. Hello, Véronique Guillemin for Le Figaro. The crisis in Ukraine has caused a kind of reaction in the EU. They want to strengthen their sovereignty, their defense. Germany announced 100 billion euros in 2022 for its armies and reached 2% of the German GDP. Emmanuel Macron, 2 days ago, said that France would strengthen its efforts in defense, so there'll be an increase in the military budgets. What do you feel about that? Do you think that there'll be a European preference? Although we see that in Germany, I'm referring to my counterpart here from Challenge. There is a want to order from the Americans. So what do you think about all this and what's your call? Now, as for France as such, the French authorities and the presidency of Emmanuel Macron was such that the defense budget has increased. There was a deflation for dozens of years, so there was an effort made in France. And we have to welcome that and the announcements made, which are political announcements. The defense will have to be strengthened And so we're welcoming this with great interest because there is a need in our armies. We need to catch up. And this hasn't been done. Although the budgets have increased, we have to catch up the capacities of the previous decades and prepare for the future. So this creates a lot of budget tension at a time when you know about the state of the budget right now. So we are perfectly supporting this announcement. Now in Germany, before talking about Europe, the topic is slightly different. For years now, the NATO has asked for the 2%. I'm saying NATO has asked for 2%. According to the calculations. Now, if the first decision is to increase the budget to 100 billion, which was lower than what France was doing, so you cannot compare. Germany was slightly behind. If the first decision is to buy the F-35, well, that will refresh our support in that area. But, you know, I don't want to be bad omened, but I'm sure they're going to buy F-35. They said so even before the Ukraine matter. It was what the German government wanted to do. They have to have a certain type of American armament that they had with the Tornadoes, which was a European aircraft. And now the Americans are saying, you have to exclusively have American aircraft. And I've understood for the last 3-4 years, I'm strongly interested in Germany. The Germans could envisage the F-18, but the Americans have said, no, it's the F-35, so they don't have the choice. So yes, European preference, you see, that's white lie. The president is fighting to obtain the possibility of having more European in Europe. We're supporting his approach very strongly, but we will see with our partner number one, that is Germany, if their first choice is to sign the FCAS contract or to buy the F-35, knowing that it's not the same need and capacity. The NGF will be operational in quite a number of years, whereas the F-35 can be delivered in 3 years from now. And it is a strategic topic. Now, as for Europe, I'd like to congratulate the EU to be interested in defense. I'm saying congratulations, but of course there is a nuance. Great, you're interested in defense for defense. If it is just to have taxonomic arms and stigmatize the defense industry because they are manufacturing arms in Europe by Europeans, then I don't understand. I will leave this schizophrenic debate to our friends from the Commission, but I really denounce this. Taxonomy is not an efficient weapon against the current threats. It's a weapon against us, armament industries. And the large companies can manage, but the smaller companies, and I'm the president of the defense industry, the small ones are having trouble with banks. The banks are saying armament is like tobacco, alcohol, you shouldn't have it. So I'm not going to put money in those companies. If that is the notion of strategic autonomy, and the strategic autonomy is to buy exclusively from the Americans, that is not my idea. I don't think that's the idea of the president either. So there's something we need to do here.
I don't understand why you're going to deliver fewer Rafale next year because you have Qatar, Egypt. No, we haven't. You're going to start to manufacture as per the new orders. We have the contracts that have already signed. We have not started for France for budget reasons, so we are finishing. It's the tail of the deliveries for Egypt, Qatar, where Egypt is done. We still have Qatar and India. And what about inflation pressure on your business and the collective bargaining agreements? And have you found an agreement with the employees, and is it a threat on your production program? Well, in September last year, it was the beginning of our annual negotiation of collective bargaining agreements for the wage increase. French, European, international partners said that there is a one-off inflation because of, as a consequence of the slowdown on the market because of COVID. But this one-off inflation is now becoming more structural than market-related because it's been lasting for a few months. This inflation is here to stay, apparently. In France, but in the US, more than in France, inflation is such that the central banks are thinking about having some corrective measures on the interest rates. Since the countries have huge debts, if the rates go up, paying the debt with a new debt is quite a problem. So inflation has gone up even before the crisis. At the end of 2021, December to December, we said inflation is 2.8%. But as it was calculated, the average inflation increase was identified as 1.6% because there is always a time lag. So it has generated some claims from our workers. Our mandatory negotiations were held and then signed by the unions representing more than 60% of the employees in the works councils. So legally, we are bound by an agreement, but this agreement has been signed by 2 unions. And other organizations, other unions have started a strike because they disagreed with this 1.8% general wage increase. In this annual negotiation, you have general agreement on a pay rise and also per individual and based on seniority. This agreement called NAO is 3.75% for executives. That's individual pay rise. And for the non-executive staff, it's 3.5%. split as in 1.8% general increase for everybody and 1.7% per individual, which does include seniority. And the 1.8% was the problem compared with the 2.8%. Now, these unions have come up with several requests or claims after that. Now, and I'm not blind, neither am I deaf. I've realized that inflation went up, so we have granted a bonus, a purchasing power bonus, let's say, that the French authorities will allow. So that's 500 euros to all employees who do not have a wage equivalent to 3 minimum wage per month. And this was paid at the end of the year. These 500 euros are excluded from tax and social contribution. Now, over 10 years, the general wage increase over the last 10 years are higher than the inflation rate at Dassault. So there was no impoverishment, as you might have heard. Nevertheless, people are worried about the inflation. So we've decided to start and talk to these unions who started to go on strike. And we agreed with their claims. They said that instead of having a 1% increase, they said everybody should have the same. So a wage increase and not a bonus to everybody, but it's the same. So for small wages, Of course, it is having a greater impact than on those employees with higher wages. After lengthy negotiations, we came up with this agreement on 100 euros gross salary, which does include already the 1.8%, so that for the lowest wages, it would be a 3.2% general increase. So we are above the 2.8. It covers much more than the 2.8%. It covers 5.4% for the lowest wages. So 5.4% increase thanks to this general wage increase. That's what we've offered. No agreement has been signed yet. Some people are on strike. It doesn't mean that the production has completely stopped in our plants. Some unions are ready to discuss. Others are claiming for 200 instead of 100. But we have to negotiation. We started from 42 euros and now we are at 100. As you know, I'm keen on negotiating, so I'm expecting the other party to come up with another proposal. It wouldn't be reasonable and responsible not to start a negotiation again. Good morning. From Frankfurter Allgemeine Zeitung. Once again, on the purchasing of weapons by Germany. And will Dassault Aviation enjoy the historical decision which was made in Germany? Now, we are first and foremost working with the French armed forces, and we are going to wait and see what the president is going to announce for the future. Since he's now expressed that he is candidate for the forthcoming presidential election, he will be announcing his program. Now, if we can get organized with Germany and take advantage of this intention of the German government to come up with something that is shared, let's not forget the Eurodrone. We've accepted that Airbus would be a leader. We would like Airbus to let us be a leader on Pillar 1, where we're not a leader. Airbus is everywhere, so we're just asking for not avoiding an overlap of capacities. The German-French cooperation would be fruitful as long as we share the workload. And we said we would share it based on the best athlete. So better aircraft at a lower price. Rafale was said to be too expensive, too much this, too much that. It's not that expensive considering its functionalities, and our armies are very happy with it. They do not need an F-35 to complement a Rafale. So we're ready to get prepared for the next generation, and that's our responsibility. And we will be ready to look into that with the countries that are directed to us by our authorities. We started with the British, and then we stopped in 2018, and then there was the German, and then we opened up the door to the Spaniards and Airbus in Spain and Germany. So I only have 1/3 of the pie. So if we are involved in manufacturing the aircrafts, we will be only sharing the work packages so that we will have only 1/3. So 1/3 in Germany, 1/3 in Spain, and 1/3 in France. But 1/3 in Spain and 1/3 in Germany means 2/3 for Airbus. So the answer to your question is yes. If we think that France and Germany can benefit from this involvement in the armed forces, I guess that the German military will be going on fight just like the French military. And to us, what is important is the operations and the operating experience to better define the aircrafts of the future. One last question. There was little said about the Eurodrone. What is your share in this project? Does that generate a high revenue? 7 billion, 7.1 billion euros, as far as I remember. There's 1.2 for us out of 7.1. And you would be surprised is that we are developing the flight controls for these drones, for these Eurodrones. We are also involved in the architecture of the communication systems, because for a drone, a communication system is absolutely key, because this is what controls the flights. So communication and flight controls, and the delivery of these boxes is made with one of our subcontractors, Thales, for communication and radio. So that's our contribution to the Eurodrone program. And we also have test flights, etc., etc. Thank you. Thank you to all of you, and talk to you soon, and have a nice day. Thank you.